Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, Content Specialist for the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which is part of the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Welcome to our Middle School Civics Highlight Series. Today we will focus on Benchmark 2.10, in which we will explain the process for citizens to address a state or local problem by researching public policy alternatives, identifying appropriate government agencies to address the issue, and determining a course of action. In Part 1, we will focus our attention on identifying the appropriate level of government and government agencies to address local or state problems. First, we focus on identifying levels of government, then the agencies within those levels of government to address local or state problems. We need to ask ourselves what the appropriate level of government would be, and if it is the state, if it's Florida, we need to know about the government agencies in Florida in order to know which agency might be best suited to solve that problem or issue. Well, it's very important to know the appropriate powers of government and at which level those powers are exercised to resolving specific problems. For example, we may be particularly concerned about an issue at the local level, such as local speed limits on streets and roads. If we were to take this issue to our representative in Congress, or if we were to write to the United Nations, we're not going to get the response that we want. We probably won't get a response because not only have we identified the wrong level of government and the wrong entity, but what we're also doing is we're showing, whether it's the United Nations or the federal government, that we don't know what their powers are, and we don't know what it is that they can do with those powers. So knowing the appropriate powers of government and at which level those powers are exercised is critical, because it means that we are more likely to be heard and listened to if we engage in this identification correctly. So we have two examples in front of us. One is there has been a lot of car accidents at the same intersection. What might be the solution? To involve the local government to place a traffic light or stop signs at the intersection to prevent future accidents. In essence, the problem is a lot of car accidents. The solution is slowing down cars, because the slower a car is going, the easier it is for that car to stop. As well, we can also require that those cars will stop at certain places, such as at intersections. And if a person sees that a stop sign is coming up, then they're going to slow their car down, so it's going to be easier to stop the car. And thus, there will be fewer accidents at that intersection, because cars that are approaching the intersection are going to slow down because they might see a yellow light or a red light or a stop sign. Another problem. Florida has a large increase in the number of high school dropouts. Now, when a person graduates from high school, they have accomplished something that not everyone has accomplished. And what that means is that by getting that high school diploma, they are then going to have far more opportunities than a person who doesn't have a high school diploma. That might be being able to attend college. That might mean being eligible to secure certain jobs. And consequently, it is in the public interest for there to be a higher percentage of high school dropouts compared to fewer high school dropouts, or to keep that number the same. In other words, to not try to fix that issue, to increase the number of students who are receiving high school diplomas. What might be a solution? contact the state representative or state senator who leads the appropriate legislative committee to introduce a bill that will fund a statewide dropout prevention program in public high schools. So the idea is that since it's a state of Florida problem, you need to go to the state legislature. And then when you go to the state legislature, you're more likely to get a response that's going to affect the entire state. Certainly, if in your own local high school there's a dropout problem, that doesn't mean that going to the school board is not going to help. But if there's a statewide problem, then perhaps a statewide solution is going to have more of an impact. Let's look at some agencies that address state problems in Florida. Here we have on the left 3 different problems, what a citizen might request as a policy change, and then who the responsible agency might be. Here's a problem. A voter arrives at an election day polling place at 9 p.m., 2 hours after the polls closed at the state mandated time at 7 p.m. The voter made one of 2 errors. One, they didn't try to find out when the polls closed, or they knew that it was a high turnout election and they saw on the news that there were these very, very long lines at the polls, and they said, why should I bother going to the line that's still going to be there at 9 o'clock? Why should I bother going at 6:30 or 6:45? Well, that means that the voter doesn't know that in the state of Florida, a person must be in line by 7 p.m. when the polls close. And once they're in line on time, then that means that the polling place cannot close until all the voters in that line have voted. So a person might say, if I'm not going to vote till 9 o'clock, why should I get in line before 9 o'clock? That's because you lose your right to vote. And it could be that the process is going so quickly after a certain time of day that the voter thought from the morning that it would be a long line, and it turns out that the polls closed right at 7 o'clock because all the voters in line had a chance to vote, and by that time that the voter gets to the polling place at 9 o'clock, the polling place is completely shut down, all the poll workers have gone home and decided to start finding out who won the election. But the citizen might still believe that a 9 o'clock closing time is a good idea so that more people might be able to come out and vote. So that person would write to the state legislature asking that election day polling be extended by 2 hours on election day. The responsible agency is the Florida Department of State. The Division of Elections functions within the Florida Department of State. Another problem. 2 boats ran into each other on the St. Johns River. The sister of one of the boat operators writes to the state legislature asking that boaters be required to take a class on boat safety. So here, this boating accident, this sister of one of the operators says, you know something? I suspect that that boat operator could have done a better job driving that boat if they had taken another class on boat safety. If they had done what they should have done in order to operate the boat safely. Who would they contact? The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Our third problem. An orange grower is concerned that citrus sales are dropping every year. So the orange grower is concerned about the fact that they are not earning as much money, and thus it becomes a public problem because they're not paying as much taxes for the sales of these particular items. Florida doesn't have an income tax, but there are other taxes associated with doing business. So the orange grower goes to a public meeting of the Florida Citrus Commission to ask that it fund a public information campaign about the health benefits of orange juice. So if you can get more people to want oranges, if you drive up the demand, then that means that the supply will follow suit, right? That if a person has a demand then for more oranges, then that means that the orange grower's supply is then going to be available for purchase. And that person would contact the Florida Citrus Commission. So now we will ask ourselves, what are the appropriate government agencies to address local problems in Florida? Every public problem is unique. Identifying the proper agency to address a local problem is a critical step to solving that problem. Let's first look at a problem that some of us may have experienced. Some of us might not consider it a problem. But a homeowner is concerned that the neighbor's dog is barking at night. That means that they have trouble sleeping, they have trouble enjoying the time that they spend with their family. And so that homeowner writes to the county commission asking that the commission pass an ordinance requiring dogs to be kept indoors between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So that means that if the dog's going to bark at night, then only the dog's owners would be bothered by it. The responsible agency would be the County Animal Services Office. A high school student is concerned that her fellow high school students are not scoring well on the U.S. History end of course exam. So the student then makes a formal request at the next school board meeting to fund an after-school tutoring program to help students prepare for the U.S. History end of course exam. This is really very important that this student is not going to the state and saying, let's lower the standards to get the pass rate up. Instead, let's get more information to these students so that they will do better. And one of the ways to do that is to form an after-school program. So here's a student who went to the local school board looking for that help and support. Finally, someone who lives in an apartment is concerned that mice, rats, and cockroaches are getting into the trash bins and creating a health problem. The apartment resident makes a formal request at the next city council meeting to add one more trash pickup per week at apartment buildings, and that way all of these mice, rats, and cockroaches, which together we call vermin, that these vermin would not have enough time to get to all what they might consider to be goodies in the trash. The responsible agency would be local waste and sanitation departments. Thank you for joining me for Middle School Civics Highlights. Do you still have questions? Please contact us using the information that appears on the screen. Till next time, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine. Thank you for joining me.